Hey everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from IrishSportsDaily.com. I'm your host, Greg Flammang, and with me again, as always, is Jamie Uyeyama on this wonderful Tuesday afternoon after Halloween. Jamie, happy Halloween!
Happy Halloween to you. I
Did you?
saw that your
Did you?
kids probably had a good time.
They did. They had the splendid time. Did you? Did you dress up? Did your son
I didn't
dress up?
dress up. I didn't
Did your
dress up.
son dress up? What was
Yeah, he
his?
just had he was Spider-Man. He was
Oh, wonderful!
Spider-Man. Yeah, there was many Spider-Mans around the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Had a great time. Ate too much candy, as as is want to do, as
Yeah.
in that situation, and slept in a little later today. But yeah, he had a great day.
He crashed out.
Yeah.
What is the go-to candy in the Uyeyama house?
I would say like Reese's peanut butter cups.
Okay.
Yeah, he loves the Reese's peanut butter cups.
Much to
Yeah.
the chagrin of Dan Orlovsky.
Yeah. I mean, Dan Orlovsky, just a great football analyst, just really horrible food takes.
The food takes are tough. They're tough food takes. All right. What about for yourself? Are you a Reese's guy? Reese's peanut butter cups? What
I mean,
else
I
you
love
got?
Reese's peanut butter cups, but I think I'm I think I'm old school, like just M&Ms, Snickers, like that. I'm not a guy that needs to go fancy. Just keep it pretty simple.
Snickers is it. That's
Who doesn't love
that's it.
Snickers?
Yeah, for sure. Snickers
Only
is awesome.
monsters. Only
Only
monsters.
only monsters. And Halloween is for monsters, right? So maybe that's going to be the problem. But yeah, so thank you everyone for tuning in. People who are just filing in right now. Thank you for tuning into the show. If you're going to watch this on replay, and if you haven't watched this before, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. The show is growing. We're very happy with that. And we want to keep it growing. So hit subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when we're coming on, and hit the like button as well. And that would be very fun, and we would appreciate that very much. And speaking of it, we appreciate Andrew, I guess, Werty. But thrilled to listen to you guys. Just discovered you as a lifelong fan of, I don't know, 47. And maybe that means he means 247, something like that. So check out IrishSportsDaily.com if you haven't so far, Andrew. And would love to hear about how this weekend can affect recruiting. Go Irish. So we know that I think for me, the biggest thing this weekend is Peyton Bowen's coming on campus. And obviously there's been a lot of speculation about him, and he's been taking a lot of visits and that sort of thing, and so he's on campus, and obviously Notre Dame, they've been able to stave off a decommitment, and I think that Notre Dame certainly has a strategy with him as far as they're allowing him to take visits and that sort of thing, and so far, he's stayed committed, and he's coming on campus for this week. So I think for me, that's the biggest thing, is keeping him locked in. But Jamie, what do you think about recruiting in this weekend and everything?
I mean, I think it's huge. I think they need some kind of like mojo to not like keep. I mean, I think they're going to keep most of the class anyways. Like I'd say almost all of the class. Bowen, might be a rare exception. We'll see, but I think that is big for him. Yeah. But I think it's just one of these things too, where, you come in and it's exciting when there's a new coach. And obviously, like, everybody knows Marcus Freeman works super hard at recruiting. The staff works super hard at recruiting. But when you're able to sell tangible results, like you beat Clemson, like that's different. It ups your level. It ups your level rather than, oh, we're close, we need you. Or we're like, man, hey, look, we're close. We just beat Clemson. We just need you to put us over the top. Like it's a different selling point, right? So I think it is big. And then obviously too, like every home game, it's been like pretty depressing. For most home games, it's been depressing in terms of when they've had visitors on campus. So like, let's perk it up a little bit, make it exciting, and get a win, and then you also get some of these recruits excited.
Yeah, and it's the only game. It's going to be the only home game this year that isn't supposed to be a blowout in favor of Notre Dame, right? Like Cal was supposed to be a blowout. Marshall was obviously, Stanford was obviously, and BC will be as well. This is the only one where it's like it doesn't matter how it goes. It doesn't matter if they start slow or whatever. Like everyone's going to be any kind of win, everyone's going to be thrilled, right? And that is the difference. And I think, and CFB Hertz kind of makes a point about that. Home versus road performance trend continued against Cuse. Also true for ranked versus unranked, right? So I think it's more of a thing where, Notre Dame is not there with Drew Pine, especially quarterback. They're not going to be a great front running team. They're not. If they start slow like they have, the crowd gets depressed. The crowd starts to make the noise that they make when Notre Dame doesn't look good initially, and that leads people to have a different kind of mood. And I think this game will be completely different in that regard. So that's kind of how I see it. And, and it would be great for Peyton Bowen, obviously, to see a win. And then for the 2024 as well, right? Like you want to get that going. There's going to be some 2020 recruits in at the game, so you want to get that started up, right? So so that's the thing. Before we totally get into Clemson, though, I do want to wrap up the Syracuse game, Jamie, and obviously you've watched the game back, and I've watched the game back a bunch of times as well. What is your your main takeaway from this game? Offense or defense doesn't matter to me. Just what is your thing taken away from this game as Notre Dame moves forward, not just against Clemson, but for the rest of the year?
Well, one, that they kind of stuck to the game plan. Like it was exactly what you had to do to beat Syracuse. They didn't get cute with it. They ran the ball 70% of the time.
Yeah.
They leaned on it. That's what they had to do. They ran it inside just about every time, other than a few exceptions. They played really good defense. They had a good plan on defense. They dominated the special teams again. It was, obviously the quarterback part of it is part of the offense too. But I think if you look at all the pieces and kind of considering the plan, it was probably the most complete game Notre Dame has played all year. Yeah. Right. And it really couldn't come at a better time, because you're thinking about that's a big road game you're on there. And then you got to be able to play a complete game against Clemson. And obviously you got to be better because Clemson's a better opponent. But still, you want to have a complete game, and that the special teams is playing exceptionally well right now. The defense, I think, is playing better than they have for the entire year, and the offensive line, I think, is playing better, and the backs are running better than they have all year. So those are all positive, and that's the main thing I take away from the game.
Yeah, I think those are good points, and for me, I think it's just what I talked about on the post game reaction show about how they found a way to win a game when they didn't get good play from the quarterback. And then that hadn't been the case, right? So
against a good opponent. Yeah.
Against a good opponent, right. So and that's been, because the other games where, they played games where it was they were kind of underdogs going in. I mean, North Carolina and BYU were both kind of pick'ems. It was really close. In this game, I think Syracuse was, a 3-point favorite or something like that. But in those other games, they got good play from Drew Pine, and that was kind of the springboard. And this game, they didn't get that, right. He didn't look good again. The passing game didn't look good again, and they were able to kind of dominate them and beat them up front, especially when Syracuse knew this is what they're going to do, and Notre Dame was able to do it anyway, and they were able to do it right away too. You could just from the moment the game started, it's like, man, they're getting pushed against these guys. They're gonna be on for a good one. So I think that was not kind of my main takeaway there. And so I guess, I think we've been looking for kind of improvements on this team. You want to see the team getting better. And Baby Beast, before I get into that, Baby Beast, we'll make our prediction on Thursday. Usually that's what we do. So our Thursday show, we'll make predictions and that sort of thing. I do want to come out. Baby Beast is looking for an identical score and situation to the 2020 game, which would be great, right? 47-40 to overtimes. That would be a fun one.
First play, 65-yard house call too.
Let's do it. Let's go. Let's go. Let's do the whole thing, right? DJU will be there, right? So we'll get that going. And so where do you getting back to the improvements on the team? Let's start with just the offense. Where do you see the team having improved? Obviously it feels like they haven't because of the passing game taking a step backwards. But do you feel like there's an improvement there from the team as far as on the offensive side of the ball? Again, looking forward to the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at where they are. Pass protection, they have been good, right? They have been good, and they've done a better job running the ball. But I think just specifically with the offensive line, like combo blocks, like they are like really working in concert now,
Yeah.
and just moving people consistently off the ball. And I think the backs, I think part of it is because these guys have run more now, and guys like Diggs and Esteme are like the feature guys. And when you run it more, you get more comfortable and you see it a little bit better. You see things a little bit better. And I think vision wise and all that, they've been incredibly better and like making more decisive for their cuts and just doing a better job in general. So I think, running game wise, specifically, I think it's like night and day to where it was even like a month ago.
Yeah. And so there's definitely that part of it. And I think too, like, I think they finally have the personnel situation kind of sorted in the skill positions as well. Like the fact that you got Deion Colsey not only activated, but then he was a contributor.
Yeah.
Like that makes a big difference. I think now Tobias has a role, so that's no longer a talking point. Like, he's going to be out there, and that, Mitchell Evans is kind of, he's gotten into it. So you kind of know that, right? And like there are guys you put in the game, like Jaden Thomas is really solidified. He hasn't taken a step back or anything like that. And so that's where that's an improvement in terms of just getting everyone engaged and ready to go. I do think that the kind of the elephant in the room with this offense is not simply just the passing game, but the lack of explosiveness. And that has to be, I think, like a huge thing, especially next week against Clemson. You're going to have to get some explosive plays. I mean, speaking of the 2020 game, right? Like you open the game with a 65-yarder, right? You hit Avery Davis with a 53-yarder, at the end of the game. Like those are explosive plays. They hit Javon McKinley on a deep ball in that game. So there were moments where it's like you're getting chunk plays against this team, and you're going to have to do that again. And just to kind of, I don't know that they need to do that like the rest of the, against like Navy or Boston College, but just from a best practices point of view, like you do want to be that kind of a team. And Diggs and Estime aren't really those types of runners, but Tyree clearly is. And I know a lot of people have been talking about how, they're not using them right. And we've talked about it too. It's not like it's unfounded or anything. They got to get them on the outside. But there were a couple plays in this game where, that there was a play. I remember it was in the first half, but he gets the ball. And if he bounces that and he's on the way to bouncing it, if he gets outside, he's going to walk in, right? There's no one there. And he gets tripped up by the nose tackle, and that's what you got to break that. Like that has to be, you have to get out of that. And there's another one where, they block down, they wall everyone off, and it's him in the corner, and the corner gets him, right? It's a gain of 5. Fine. He gets the first down on the next carry. Fine. We're moving the chains and that sort of thing. But that's one where it's like, if you make the corner miss, you're going to score again. And that's one where it's like, look, we say you need space. And those are two plays where it's like, you're in the open. You gotta get out of that. Like that is a play.
You gotta make one guy miss.
We can't. It can't be that you need everyone accounted for and you just get the ball and you're just running straight, right? Like maybe that can happen once in a different offense when you have a running quarterback and the safeties are kind of leaving the middle of the field and that sort of thing. But that's not the situation, and I don't think it's too much to ask that you break a tackle, you make someone miss in space, and then you're off to the races, And I think that's the kind of thing where, there's got to be a complementary piece to that too, right? Like the line and the receivers and the tight ends. Like you said, the way they're blocking right now is fantastic. Like the Estime touchdown where he goes untouched up the middle, you get the double team from Lugg and Fisher. Fisher scrapes off to the linebacker, walls off the linebacker, and then you get the two tight ends with Evans and Mayer. They they double team the end, and then they get off to the safety, and it's just beautiful, right? And it's untouched, right? And that's how you want it to go. But if you're going to get something like that, then it's got to be paid off by the back. So that's the thing where they've got to get better there. And Jamie, where do you see the defense? Where do you see the defense improving so far this year?
Well, I know people aren't thrilled with the linebacker play, and it hasn't been great, but it has gotten better.
The last two games,
yeah,
Bertrand, yeah,
and Bertrand has been better, and I think Marist has been a lot better too. Like, but Bertrand specifically has been a lot better. So that's been something, because I actually think, because I know like people were like, play Prince Cully. I don't think Prince Cully has looked that good, to be honest. I don't think like, I think he looks lost out there a lot. And now you can start to see why when, guys play, and then you're like, oh, you're seeing that, and you can see why he didn't immediately jump up. Mm-hmm. And why he wasn't one of like the top 4 linebackers in the thing. And there's certainly plays where he looks really good and you can see his athleticism, but I do think that, Marist and Bertrand are the best guys right now. So they've gotten better for sure. They've definitely gotten better. And that's when I think Golden is doing a better job. I think he's been, and part of it is game plan, right? But he's been more aggressive. And I think that has paid off. With some of the stuff that they're doing, even just like the little like TT, like tackle stunts up front, I think that's made a difference, right? So, and I think, when you look at like Foskey is playing at a much higher level, like Nana is playing like really, really, really good versus the run. Like Howard Cross is getting healthier, and I think that's one thing that's because. They really missed him in that BYU game when he was hurt. And I think he's looked like he's playing on one good ankle the last few weeks. And then he looked, I think, to me, the most like himself in this game. And you're just seeing more from the defensive line in general, I think, where they're kind of like taking control. And then I think, on the back end, obviously you got plays from Brandon Joseph. And I mean, they're just desperate for that, right? And so there's just a lot of stuff where, I think I still don't see it, growing into an elite defense, but they've just made like the havoc has been a lot better. They've been more aggressive. I think, they've been pretty, they've been steady for the most part all year, and you're just kind of hoping for that extra bump. And I think they've gotten a little bit of that extra bump lately.
Yeah. And you talked about, I think you've talked about in your recaps, the increase in havoc plays, right? Yeah. And those have been, I mean, obviously, right. You're getting them in negative plays, and that's going to really help. And that helps the fact that they're now, they've been a lot better on third down, getting off the field. Right. And that makes a huge difference. They've had a bunch of 3 and outs the last couple of weeks. Right. And the first one was UNLV, and okay, you write it off. It's UNLV. And then against Syracuse, that continued, right? They gave up the 1 touchdown to start the game. And then they strung together a bunch of 3 and outs. Right. And that's how you win games, and that's a big improvement for them. Obviously they're finally turning teams over. Right. And we saw it even against Stanford, right? You're forcing a bunch of fumbles, and you didn't recover them. You didn't recover them, but you did it. And that started to happen. And then you saw that against UNLV, right? And it's hard because the defense doesn't get credit for blocked punts and that sort of thing, but they are defenders.
They're all defenders making those plays.
Yeah. So it is a defensive kind of thing. It's not the defense per se, but it is defenders making these plays. And not just Brandon Joseph, he has the pick 6. He has 1 interception that's taken off the board because someone lined up off sides. And then you have Cam Hart, who dropped a pick, right? And that's a clear drop. That wasn't the Clarence Lewis one where it's like, he's not really doesn't have 2 hands on it. Like this is one that's in his chest, and there's no one in a hand in there and that sort of thing. And then you get the tip ball by Howard Cross that gets, intercepted by Marist, right? So the turnovers are starting to come. The havoc rate is starting to come. You're getting off the field on third down. And I think that the one thing that is just killing them all the time is the red zone. They continue to not get any stops in the red zone, right? And I kind of feel like I'm not going to hold the field goals, or I mean, look, a lot of that's not really up to them. If you force a field goal and they're making
it's the touchdowns
it's the touch, but the thing is, the touchdown percentage is just astronomical.
85%. It's horrible. Yeah,
that's incredible. So I guess where, because I've been thinking a lot about this, like, where do you see that? Like, is it a fluke? Is it just kind of an anomaly in terms of, teams are exploiting Notre Dame in the red zone? I mean, I know there's been a couple of fourth downs that have been hit. There was a fourth down against North Carolina. There was a fourth down that was hit against BYU. But where do you see the disconnect there? Like, is it fluky? Is it something that you've seen, schematic wise? Like, where do you see the problem in that spot?
I think maybe there's been a couple times where, the other team had a really good, like, they dialed up a really good play, right? Yeah. And they had a good scheme and scheme beat them, whatever, right? Or like, they've had like North Carolina. I can't remember if it was North Carolina, maybe it was BYU, where like they had like a nice little pick play that got them open. It was very identical to the Corey Robinson.
It was North Carolina.
Yeah. Right. So like that kind of stuff, sometimes you're like, okay, well, what are you going to do? Like they just had that called, they ran it right. Like whatever. The problem is that you have to be able to generate, negative plays there. And I think you have to find a balance between like playing sound and playing aggressive there. And also too, like they've also like given up a lot of stuff where they were like getting into like and goal situations. It's not like they're like getting it to the 17 and then it's like whatever. Because then obviously it's a lot easier to get a field goal attempt or whatever than it's then. But when they're like giving up a play where it's like they tackle them within the 5-yard line, it's like, well, most teams going to score within inside the 5-yard line. So that's part of it too. But like I look at this game, and so that one play where I mean, I don't know if Freeman is protecting Benjamin Morrison there, or if he's because he played the improper technique in that one where he kind of bailed out, or I don't know if they were like, hey, we're playing it because they usually run the fade, because they run the fade there a lot, right? But obviously that was like a big mistake because there was no help in the middle and he just got beat easy on a slant. It looked like he wasn't even trying, right? And so there's those kind of things that happen in this game. And then there's the other one where it's just like a tempo thing and Kaiser's on the edge and he just like, I don't even know what he was doing. He just got stuck and then just got beat to the outside. But like, really, he's unblocked. Like there's no reason why that shouldn't be like a tackle for loss, right? So I don't know. Maybe it's like in their head a little bit. I don't think it's like one of these things where you say like, oh, they're getting bullied down there because it's like, they don't have big enough defensive tackles. I don't think it's that. I think they've had, and they've been pretty good when it's like 3rd and 4th and short this year. I don't know what the power success rate is, but I should probably look at that. But I think that like in general, they've gotten like some pretty big stops in those kind of situations. So I don't think it's a case of them getting like bullied down there or anything like that. Teams can just run at will on them. So I think it's like some of it's bad luck, but they're just not making enough plays. And maybe that's just like, they don't have enough just like natural playmakers that can kind of take over, or they aren't like built for that kind of thing where like, Foskey's like a 3rd and long guy. That's when you want Isaiah Foskey. He's not going to be like a and goal guy.
Yeah. The Morrison play. So I was listening to, I think was it you and Mike that talked about how they said it was a fade? Was that you and Mike?
Yeah, that was me.
On Power Hour. Yeah. So he opens up, right? And so even if you think it's a fade, you shouldn't open up.
You shouldn't open up that
much because even if it is a fade, all he has to do is jam him outside and widen him again, and then go inside of him, and then he has inside and then because then he can just box you out, right? So like that's not even a great technique for the fade, right? If you're gonna open, then open to his inside shoulder, and then do that, because then you can still wall him off with your back. You can essentially box him out, right? So like to completely open the gate like that, like that's not how you want to play it, especially at that area of the field. You always want to be able to use the boundary to your advantage. And so by opening up like that, you are now giving him the field, which is open because you're in zero. You have no safety. You have no safety help. So he can still take the inside. So that's not what you want. So I think it's poor technique, even if they were playing for the fade there, and that's what he was trying to do. And to your point, like, so that's where, like, in the North Carolina game, like that's where they had a 3rd and long early in the first drive with North Carolina, and the quarterback scrambles for a first down, against UNLV, right? You have 4th and 2, and JD Bertrand's got him dead to rights, and he misses them, and then they end up converting, and then they get a touchdown. So it's just like little things like that. Like BYU has the 4th down, and the kid, they all false start, and they don't call it, and they get a touchdown that way. And then you have the pick play, right? So there's been kind of fluky things throughout the year, but that's why I think, like, next year, I wonder if they're just going to have like an historically good red zone defense, just because of regression and, going back to the mean, like a homeostasis type thing. Because there's just been a lot of things that, like, I don't feel like you say, I don't feel like they're getting gashed or anything. It's just like, yeah, we're in the red zone. It's almost like, it's just like, this is the thing for the 2022 defense.
It's very like look up at the sky at the end of the play, like, oh my God, how did this happen again? Like, that's what it feels like. Yeah, it's not like they're, and also too, like, they're like one of the lowest teams in terms of giving up red zone possessions, which is why, like, the points.
That's why the points are down, right?
Yeah. So
yeah. Mr. Sanders asks, Silu, so I think he's saying Silu here, referring to Clarence Lewis, seems to play better than Morrison when he's out there this year. Am I wrong?
Well, I think he's made more plays because he's more noticeable because, he ripped the ball out and recovered it. He blocked a punt in this game, right? He's gotten his hands on the football more, right? So when that happens, you get noticed for that. And he's always been good at that. I think he's a good football player, right? Like, but I mean, when have you seen Benjamin Morrison just getting toasted? He hasn't, right?
Yeah.
He's lost sometimes 50-50, and you want to see him do better and play better technique and stuff too. But there's a lot when you see Ben Morrison, you're like, oh man, this guy's going to be so good because like he is right there, with running with whoever, right? Whoever it is. And that's not what you've seen with Lewis, right? You see him get beat to, like, especially vertically, right? So I think Clarence Lewis has, done really well in his role this year and like has helped out. And I think he's a valuable guy on the team. But I think, Morrison too, I still think, the best of Ben Morrison this year probably is not what we've seen yet. And I think overall he's done a pretty solid job. Teams are going to go at him because he's a freshman. That's just going to keep happening. Yeah. And he's given up some stuff, but and he also plays a position where he gets targeted way more than anyone else.
Ben Morrison has good numbers in terms of, targets and completions allowed and that sort of thing. I think Clarence Lewis, to make a basketball analogy, like he feels like a player who, it's like in basketball, you give him 15 minutes and it's like, really enjoyed those 15 minutes, you did a good job. But if you play him for 35 minutes, it's like, okay, we're starting to see a little bit.
That's a great analogy.
We're starting to see a little bit of why maybe we don't want to play him that much.
Come in with the twos, and you end up doing really well in that second unit, and you're like, wow, he really gave us energy.
Yeah, he gave us something.
He hit a couple threes. Maybe he jumped into a passing lane, stole the ball, whatever. Did valuable. But if you have to ask him to do something like that all the time, I think that's probably where. Or, I mean, the other thing is too, whatever, it's not like something I haven't brought up before that other people haven't brought up, but like, I do think that, he could end up playing safety next year, right? So that might be something for him that kind of suits him more. But obviously, I mean, great to see him get a block punt and that too. Like, I mean, geez, there's been it like the fact that it's not just been Foskey blocking the punts, you know what I mean? Because if it's like one guy, then you're like, hey, they blocked all these punts, and you're like, well, you know, it is one guy just doing it, you know. But really, like, you know, you got him and Cully, and you know, obviously Bauer had one too, and there's been a couple other guys that have been close too.
You know what, too, with the block punts is that, so usually, or I don't want to say usually, I don't know what it's like for other programs, but for Notre Dame, I always felt like Notre Dame either blocks it, or if they go punt block and they miss it, we're going to rough them. We're going to run into them. And that was the balance, right? It's like, if you go for it, you got to block it, because if you don't, it's going to be roughing and it's going to be a first down, right? So it was almost like, I don't even want you to try, because I feel like, let's just get the ball. And this year, I feel like there's always a possibility of them blocking it, but there's been so many times where they've been close and not blocked it, but they're not touching the guy.
Yeah.
I mean, they're so good at, I don't know that they've, and I don't even, actually, I'm not even going to say it. All I'm going to say is they've not done it so far. And they're just really good at it. And obviously the Mason drills them on it, right? Obviously it's a huge part
coaching.
It's how they practice. And it's just like, we're going to be close. Like, watch all the punts, man. Like, you can see like, oh, they're a half step away, or they're just kind of,
even if they get one of it
coming through,
even if they get a penalty, it's like, okay, like, you accept that because it has paid off so many times. Yeah. It's not like they've gotten a lot of penalties like that. And obviously you don't want to have one in any game or whatever, any kind of situation, but like, I don't know. I mean, they've obviously, and like the punting average, I did a thing in Six Thoughts like a couple weeks ago too. Like, teams' punting average is down against Notre Dame. And I think that's because they're like, got to get this off right now.
They got to get it out. And then the other part too is Brandon Joseph's had a bunch of like 10-yard returns, which takes like 10 yards off the net, you know, and that's a big deal, right? That's a first down you don't have to get, right? Where it's like, he's not breaking one, but at the same time, like, it's a shorter punt anyway, because you got to get it off. You're rushing everything. And then he returns it for a little bit. And it's like, okay, like, that's a huge, Notre Dame is like a really good field position team this year, right? Like,
they're first.
Stats of War, right? Like, Parker for Stats of War. He used to work for Football Outsiders. Like, he's been putting it up. They're first in field position, and this is why, right? They're really good with their punt situation, and so that's super important. And so this is going to be a little bit shorter show because we both got to get going. So let's go into just a little bit of your first impressions of.
By the way, just to add this in here too, before, Notre Dame 4th in punt returns this year too, with 20, and they've averaged 10 yards per return.
It's a first down. You're averaging a first down for the offense on punt returns, right? Like, that's a huge thing, and you feel like it's not. You feel like it's not that way. Right. Like, you just don't, you feel like you're not, they're returning them, but they're not getting much. But like, that is a huge advantage. That's why Notre Dame is first in, that's why they're first in field position. Right. It's a great advantage for the team. So what is your overall impression of the game upcoming? Right. Because we were talking a little bit before we started recording, and this isn't, I don't think this is one of Clemson's better teams. Right. And I said, I thought that Clemson was very similar to Syracuse in that they have the one back that they want to get involved. They have a quarterback they're using as a runner now. You know, I think everything they do is better than Clemson, a little bit better, but in terms of style,
Syracuse.
In terms of style, I feel like they're a very similar team, you know, and they're going to do similar concepts. Defensively, I think they're better up front, certainly. But they're weaker in the secondary. Now the question is, you know, can Notre Dame take advantage? We've seen Notre Dame take advantage of like poor lines and linebacker play and that sort of thing. We've seen that, right? And poor safety play. But we haven't, like, can Notre Dame take advantage of a secondary that's leaky, right? We don't know that can happen. But we were also talking, this might be a weather game, right? And with rain and wind and that sort of thing. First of all, if it's a weather game, do you feel like that plays into Notre Dame's advantage, or if it's?
Oh yeah,
I agree with
definitely.
that. I didn't want to speak out of turn and assume, but I think that would be a huge advantage for Notre Dame. I don't know if it's advantage or whatever. I
already think it is one of these things. How many times do they go, other than when they go up to Boston College at a time, when it's cold, they don't go up, like these teams from the South don't go up to play teams. Even when they go up to play Syracuse, it's indoors, right? Like they don't have to deal with it. Like when's the last time Clemson went to go play Pitt late in the year? It doesn't happen a lot. I think that was also, even though that game, I don't think it was like bitter cold, that 2020 game, but like it's colder, right? Like that's a thing. It is a thing for these guys if you haven't played in it. And obviously there's some guys like it doesn't matter, that doesn't matter.
Right.
Like they're gonna ball out no matter what. But it's the guys that are like, mid anyways, and then all of a sudden they become less, right? And that's can make a difference. So I do think I'm not a huge believer in I think home field advantage in a certain sense, especially because Notre Dame's home field advantage and who knows how many Clemson fans are going to be there. It can be a little bit overrated, but I do think getting a team up like Clemson late in the year, when you get Florida State late in the year, if they ever got USC late in the year, I think that's an advantage, right? I think that's definitely an advantage. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think Notre Dame fans should root for bad weather.
Okay. It's interesting. So it's not usually the case that you lose to the bad teams and beat the good teams on the schedule. And that's what Notre Dame has done. They've the two worst, especially after Ohio State, the two worst teams on the schedule so far, they've lost to. And I guess UNLV is probably worse than Stanford is, but you know what I mean. They're not great, right? But then, so usually it's you beat those teams, but then you lose to North Carolina or BYU or Syracuse or something, and so maybe you end up with the same record, but it's I don't know. Notre Dame can't you lost to North Carolina. How can we beat Clemson? Or how we lost to Syracuse? How can we beat Clemson? In this instance, you beat those teams pretty soundly, I think. And that's the other part of it too. It's not like a squeaker. North Carolina was not a squeaker. BYU was not a squeaker, and Syracuse not a squeaker. Those are dominant wins, in my opinion. Especially the other two games. You beat BYU by 8 points, but you outgained them by 200. So you dominate those teams. And the reason you think, Notre Dame's bad is because they lose to Stanford and to Marshall, right? But should we look at it like that? Should we view it as, can the Notre Dame team who beat the good teams on the schedule, or I should say the better teams, I mean, people feel how they feel about the teams, but should we feel like that's the team that's going to show up on Saturday? And is that team good enough?
I mean, I think that's probably fair. Even if you look at the Ohio State game, they came to play that day, right? They weren't as good as Ohio State, but they came to play, and they didn't look. And watch it at every other Ohio State game this year. Literally, the only other close game has been Penn State. That's it.
Yeah,
that's it. That's the only other team. And also look at what Ohio State. If Ohio State, you're man, Penn State's defense really got them. They averaged 7.5 yards per play in the game, and scored 40, whatever, right? Yeah. So, I'd say Notre Dame's defense did a much better job in that game, right?
The next closest team in points allowed against Ohio State is 23 points, which is more than what Notre Dame gave up in the game.
Yeah.
And it's and the other part too is I was listening to Cover 3 Pod, and they were it was because of Notre Dame, the way they played the game. No, Ohio State ran 69 plays. That is the fourth most they've played this year. They had the ball plenty. They had the ball plenty to do damage. They just didn't. It was their lowest yards per play of the year. That's just true, right? And that holds up. It holds up.
I always think too, the national guys, whatever. No shots at those guys because I think they do a good job. But I just think like national guys don't watch the games the way that everybody will, because they're like clipping through everything else. They're not watching that whole game. They're not watching Notre Dame the whole year. They're not even watching Ohio State the whole year, right? So they don't really know. Like, if you saw that game, you'd be like, wow, they really did a job against like Ohio State's receivers. So you just think like, man, Marvin Harrison, he must have just sucked that day. But he's like an all-star every other game. I'm like, no, Notre Dame did a pretty good job. Like that's part of it. It's part of it. Right. So, I don't know. Like I do think, okay, this is one thing and whatever. And I'm putting this in the Clemson scouting report that I'm putting up on Irish Sports Daily. But, and I tweeted it out yesterday too, that so Clemson's rush defense is good, right? It's definitely good, but it's not the same as it was. Like before, no one could run on them. Like no one could run on them. Like it was impossible. Like no one had any shot at running on them. Under Venables, right? And so basically, and we've talked about opportunity rate before. That's like, the rate of 4-yard runs. So like a successful run, basically that you get against a defense when there's at least 4 yards to gain, right? And so from 2014 to 2021, so under Brett Venables during that time, since Football Outsiders tracked it, they were always in the top 25. They average 11th. Most of the time they were like top 5, whatever. Mm-hmm. So like you just couldn't even get 4 yards against them. Like that's all right. Well, this year they're 107th in that category. Yeah. So some of their run defense numbers, which they're 32nd in stuff rate, 23rd in EPA per rush. They got 7th in tackles for loss of the game. They create a ton of havoc. Yes, right. They have really great players in the defensive line. There's no doubt, right? But they do give up more in the running game than they have. They also, Florida State rushed for 227 and 7.1 yards per carry against them and taking out sacks. Syracuse averaged 6.5 against them without the sacks. Some of that's quarterback driven, right? Mm-hmm. So that's part of it too. You got to remember too. And Notre Dame obviously doesn't have a quarterback. So that's where I think of like, I would say Tyler Buckner, I'd be like, oh, Notre Dame is going to run on them with Buckner. Where it is going to be tougher, but you don't play a ton of teams like Notre Dame where it's like, this is how you're going to play and this is how you're going to do it. Like, it's kind of like when Wisconsin is really good and they're really rolling. And then you're like, man, why can't people stop Wisconsin? It's like, what they're going to do all over and over. It's just, they just out physical you and they do it. So I do think there is a path for Notre Dame to like have like a good day running the football in this game. Mm-hmm. And saying that, I don't think that's enough. They still have to be able to hit on some plays. And so like the misses that Pine had against Stanford and against UNLV, he can miss like one of those, but all the other ones have to be hits. You know what I mean? Like that's basically where you're at. I think like he can't miss touchdowns. Yeah. But I think if he is able to hit some of those and they run it, I think they're going to run it a bit better than people think. Then I think there's a path to winning the game for sure.
Yeah. It'll be an interesting one indeed. Westward Manor Films, we'll get to those questions on Thursday because we got to get going. We both have to get going. We have an early one today. So we will come to the show on Thursday. I think we'll do a normal time on Thursday at 8:30 Pacific, 11:30 Eastern. So that's when we're going to be going again. So yeah, you're going to want to check that out. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We're going to be back on Thursday to preview the game. We're going to have a lot of stuff like that. A lot of good stats. And it's funny, Jamie, you mentioned that because I was looking at that just before we started recording. So that's interesting. So you're going to want to check it out. Share the show with your friends. Let people know like, hey, I really liked Hit and Hustle. It's a really good show. We learn a lot. It's a good time. We like hanging out, right? So that's what we would like you to do. If you could do that for us, that would be awesome. So again, check us out Thursday morning, 11:30 Eastern. 8:30 Pacific. We will talk to you guys very, very soon.